and welcome to a very special panel with Charlize Theron, a retrospective on her action hero career as a total badass. Charlize is known for her incredible range as a performer, and over the past 2 decades, she's really cemented herself as one of our best and most impressive modern action stars. With her latest movie, The Old Guard, out on Netflix, we're going to look back at some of her most iconic roles and hear her break down her journey and evolution in her own worlds. So thank you, Charlize, with that introduction, for being here and taking the time
Thank
to
you.
chat with me.
Of course.
Again, I kind of put that all in context, but I'm curious at what point in your career did you know that you wanted to transition into focusing on more action-focused roles?
I don't remember a specific moment. I don't think it was like I woke up one day and I said, you know what, I'd like to do action movies. I think that I have just always wanted to explore it. I never had the opportunity to. I mean, just for you to understand, like I was raised with a mother who loved Chuck Norris movies and Charles Bronson movies. So, and my dad loved the Mad Max films. I was raised on action films. Like that's the majority of the movies that we watched were those kind of movies. And then, it was peppered with a little bit of Sophie's Choice and Kramer versus Kramer at like super inappropriate ages, like 8, 9, and 10. But I think it summed up where my career went. I've always had an affinity for all of the genres. Unfortunately, 30 years ago, there just wasn't a lot of opportunity for women to do movies like this. And the first time that opportunity kind of showed itself was after I won my Academy Award in 2004. And it was really hard making that film, Æon Flux. It was really hard in the sense that there were so many preconceived ideas and there were all these boxes that everybody wanted to kind of like squeeze you into. It was a character that I think today would be celebrated, cinematically way more than it was in 2004. It was just hard. And I remember the film not really, didn't play as well as everybody thought. And there was just this moment in my career where I realized very clearly that because that movie didn't really perform, that I wasn't going to be given another opportunity. And it was really harsh. It was like, no, women can't make these movies successful. It was harsh. And it wasn't until Mad Max Fury Road came my way that that experience and what happened with that film really changed the trajectory for me. And it made me realize, no, wait a second, like there's a lot of possibilities here. You just have to find the right people who are willing to take the risk and want to explore these stories with women. And I made an active choice to look out for those filmmakers, to look out for that kind of material, to try and develop it myself as a producer. And that's kind of where I find myself today. I really like playing in all the different genres. I don't think of myself as, having a particular affinity for just one. And the good news now is, we've kind of changed the genre for women. I think there's great evidence where we now know we can't hide behind ignorance anymore. Audiences love these films. They love how we're now telling these narratives with women at the core. It's made for, I think, the stunt world. It's given it just, there's just a facelift. It feels fresh to kind of explore the world of action with women fighting. And all of that stuff really excites me.
Yeah, you touched on so many things there that I want to dig in deeper with you, because I think it is interesting. One of my questions I wanted to ask you, but you kind of answered there, is what you would consider your first almost action role, because I default to Æon Flux, but then I'm curious if, the Italian Job too was kind of your first introduction in that space to a lot of people. But like you said, with Æon Flux, there was this perception that I feel like we're discussing and hopefully continuing to overcome, that if one movie that tries something different fails, like a female action hero movie failed, well, we can never touch it again. But you did continue to go on, and it sounds like you were actively pursuing finding those roles, like with Hancock and Prometheus, and even Snow White and the Huntsman, up through Mad Max Fury Road, that was something that you continued, looking out for yourself. If I'm not putting words into yourself, looking out for yourself, but making sure that door continued to be open.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I think you're right. we can't just look at action as just physical. For sure, the Italian Job was a great experience in the sense that I realized there was still so much misconception around women in the genre, even though that film the action is really based on cars. We had to physically do a lot of that stuff. I mean, the only good thing that came out of that experience was that there was a real pressure to pull off those stunts with the actors. And that was the first time I experienced anything like that. But there was a very unfair process that went with that. You know, I was the only woman with a bunch of guys. And I remember vividly getting the schedule in our pre-production, and they had scheduled me for 6 weeks more car training than any of the guys. And it was just so insulting. But it was also the thing that put a real fire under my ass. And I was like, all right, you guys want to play this game? Let's go. And, you know, I made it a point to outdrive all of those guys. I vividly remember Mark Wahlberg halfway through one of our training sessions pulling over and throwing up because he was so nauseous from doing 360s.
Yeah.
But I was very proud of the stunt work that we did in that. I mean, I did a stunt in that movie where I do a reverse 360 or maybe 180 in a warehouse with props everywhere and people. And I did that stunt completely on my own. And it was a huge moment of like feeling like, yeah, we can do all of this stuff. And women are so unfairly thought of or treated when it comes to the genre.
It's interesting you talk about that, because that is one thing, you know, when I went back and I was watching these films in preparation for this, not only kind of the trends in the action genre and how movies were shot, where you look at Æon Flux, and it was at a time when a lot of action scenes were like these quick cuts together to ramp up performance. But then you get to what we have today with, you know, Atomic Blonde and the Old Guard, and you have these like just impressive single take shots all in frame showing the artistry of stunt choreography, and really putting it on the performer to come and say, okay, it's as much as you can kind of put into it. How has that, it sounds like you know, obviously you've put in the work. We've seen it. It's amazing for these movies, but how has that kind of evolution changed how you approach the stunt work that you want to participate in these films?
Yeah, such a great observation. I really didn't know anything about that either until I worked on Atomic Blonde, and it was really all of the stunt coordinators on that film who set just from the get-go, the tone was set. We want to do long action takes. We want to do continuous. I mean, it was the first time I think I listen, I don't know like historically, but I know that there was a real attempt to do a first, which was a spliced together take, which really played as one, but it meant that logistically we had to shoot 7 to 10 minutes of action continuously. And I know that sounds like nothing, but as a performer, that means that you have to get everything right in 7 to 10 minutes. And that is an incredibly difficult thing to do, especially for actors. And for myself, I'm not a martial arts fighter. I've never trained in martial arts, but it's plausible. And that's what's so incredible. And I was really proud of the action that we accomplished in Atomic Blonde. It felt to me like we were pushing the envelope, and we were saying that this concept that somehow women in the industry have been arguing to fight like men is just so ridiculous. And that when we celebrate women fighting like women, and that we're smart about what body parts we would be using, that we know we can't really punch because we will break every bone in our hand, but that we can fight just as hard with our elbows, with our heads, with our knees. That was when it became really exciting to me. And, you know, I think that what's great is that there is no one way, but that we are definitely pushing it. You know, you can look at a film like Fury Road, and there's definitely more edit in that film. George Miller's style in shooting his action is fast paced, but it's done in a way that doesn't feel like a cheat. You know, I think editorially we've always cheated action. And when you don't cheat it, people really know, they can feel it. And that authenticity has really, I think, been celebrated in the last decade. It's also made it really hard for crappy action movies to survive because the bar has been set so high.
Yeah. You look at especially something like Mad Max, and you're just like, I've read the stories, I've watched the behind the scenes, but I can't even, I can't even wrap my head around what went into actually making that movie, because it feels so visceral just sitting down and watching it from the comfort of my couch.
Yeah, listen, I don't think I will ever recover from the making of that film. It was a tremendous feat what we pulled off, all of us. It was hard. It was difficult. It was difficult in a different way than what I was just talking about with Atomic Blonde and those continuous scenes and long play action, in the sense that the physicality was very real. It was very, very rare that George wanted the stunt team to rely on too much wire work. And so a lot of like physical lifting in that movie was real. Like holding your body up on a car or pulling yourself out of a car and getting over to another vehicle, or action that was happening on driving vehicles consistently. It was incredibly tedious. And, but that was the challenge in that. And, I think when a filmmaker can listen to, just the narrative, the story of Mad Max is supposed to make you feel incredibly exhausted. You're supposed to be on a 3-day car chase, and that is just exhausting. And it was an exhausting shoot. I mean, he physically got us all to a place where none of that was being manufactured. It came from such a real place.
Well, I love, it's really interesting that you refer to that as feeling like a big turning point for you, which I can completely, understand. And I read a quote that you said when you were talking about the roles that you find yourself gravitating to, is, especially in the action genre, is I think you said they aren't victims, but they also aren't superheroes. And you look at a character like Furiosa, and yes, Mad Max is by its title a Mad Max movie, but Furiosa is really the main character, the central driving hero of that story. So when you look back at characters like Furiosa and Lorraine and Andy, like what draws you to these roles in addition to the action opportunities that you get in these films?
I think in general, I'm intrigued by, I guess, the messiness of being a human, especially a woman. And I think that for me, when we talk about representation, not just racial representation and cultural representation, but female representation, I remember vividly just feeling such a lack of watching conflicted women on cinema. I felt like there was always a part of me as an actor that felt so unbelievably jealous of people like Jack Nicholson and Robert De Niro, who got to play all of these really f***ed up people. And women very rarely got to explore that. It was like there was this inherent fear of putting a woman in circumstances where she might not shine. And I do believe, society has us still somewhat in this Madonna whore complex box. Like we can either be really good hookers or we can be really good mothers, but anything in between, people are sometimes not brave enough to want to go and explore. And it's so sad to me because the richness of those stories are not only great entertaining stories to tell, great movies to make, but it's a disservice to women in general. We are more complicated than those two things, and we can be many things, and that our strengths can come from our faults and from our mistakes and from our petty and our vulnerabilities and our madness. Like those are the things that make us interesting. And so I have a knee-jerk reaction when anybody ever pitches me a story or has this first line, like, she is a warrior and she is a hero. It oversimplifies, I think, the complexities and the beauty of what it means to be a woman. And I've never, ever strived to inherently underline those qualities in any of the characters that I've played. I think all of my characters have had this sense of they're all survivors. They're all just trying to survive. And that I can relate to. As a woman, I can relate to that. I am not a hero. I don't relate to heroes. I think people who inspire me are people who don't think of themselves as heroes. They put their head down, they do the work. And I have an affinity for that. I like that. And that is a quality that I really respond to. And so I don't want my women the characters that I play. I don't want any of them to feel like women that we can't sit in a cinema and say, yeah, I see a little bit of myself in there.
I know, I read the great New York Times piece that was put together looking back at the 5-year anniversary of Mad Max Fury Road. And a lot of what was discussed in there was how, when you guys were there on the ground, you were trusting in George for his overall vision, but you didn't have kind of that full perspective of what the finished product would be. I'm curious now, 5 years later, and you look back at who Furiosa is now for so many people and what that movie is. What is your perspective on what you guys ultimately created in that character?
I'm incredibly proud of what we pulled off. I really am. I'm really proud of that character. Furiosa is definitely one of, I think, the most important characters I've ever played. And I saw the potential. I knew how special it was right from the beginning, and I chased it really hard because of that. I saw something that I'd never seen before as an opportunity for myself as an actor. And I think it was to show a female character in a way that felt, I don't know, the closest thing that I can kind of, the analogy, the closest moment in my own life that I can look back to was when the first time I saw Sigourney Weaver play Ripley. It just changed everything for me. It was like the world opened up and the possibilities were just endless. The amount of intelligence that she brought to that role, she was completely in demand of it. She owned that world, but it wasn't forced and it wasn't written and it wasn't acted. It was just lived and she was just living in that world in such an authentic way. And Furiosa was the first time that I really felt like I couldn't even look at her as a character. She felt so real to me. And maybe it was because the shoot was so hard. The fact that we were there for so long, that we really did live in that environment for so long, that made me feel that way about her. I don't know if that character can, in a small part, do what Ripley did for me as an actress, as a woman. That's something that I'm incredibly proud of. That doesn't happen in everybody's career. And I feel really lucky that I was given that opportunity, that I was prepared for that opportunity, and that I was willing to, to lay it all out there, to give it my all.
Yeah. It's amazing. And then, you've been producing your own movies since Monster, but I looking back and kind of reading up on the trajectory of things, you came off Mad Max Fury Road and you had Atomic Blonde optioned for a while to produce. And I look at that story, and that is a title that feels like it was really important to you. Not only did you option it, but you pursued David Leitch as director, after seeing his work on John Wick, and you helped push the action scenes in that movie to be as impressive as they ended up being through, reading interviews with the various choreographers and everyone who worked on it. So why was that movie so important for you, and what does it mean to you now as, that point in your career?
It was the first time that I developed something from such a small, tiny little kernel. I mean, there was an unpublished graphic novel. We were sent 8 pages. It wasn't even finished. And I said yes to those 8 pages. I think the reason why I pushed as hard as I did on that film was because, and this is just a sad truth, there's still a part of me as a female actor that always feels like this might be the last opportunity. And that's it's terrible that that's kind of in my psyche. It's also the thing that drives me and puts a real fire under my ass to get it right. And I was relentless on that film. And because I felt like I carried a responsibility since I was developing it, that I couldn't kind of look back and say, well, it was the script. I was in charge of everything. And I didn't want to get it wrong. I wanted to get it right because there's a part of me that still, I still sometimes feel like that if you get it wrong that one time, it's kind of like what we were talking about with Æon Flux, that you just will not be given that opportunity again. and listen, my kind of entry into action has come much later in my life. You know, I made Atomic Blonde when I was 40 years old. There's a sense of like feeling like, okay, time is running out. You got to get it right. If you really want to, if this means this much to you and you want to kind of stay in this game, you got to get it right. And so there was a lot of pressure. I put a lot of pressure on everybody on that movie. I hired David Leitch for that reason, that he could handle it. You know, I said to him, I'm never going to stop, and I'm going to expect you to never stop. And like any kind of mediocrity is going to be the enemy on this film. And when I look back at the behind the scenes, I mean, both of us, that whole team, Sam Hargraves, who now has his own career as a director, who shot a lot of those action pieces, we left it all on the dance floor. We really did. And again, you really are as good as the people that you get to work with. And I was very lucky that I got to work with really good people on that film, great people on that film.
Well, you talk about some of these sequences in movies, like making you tired as the viewer, watching that stare, like, I am tired with you as Lorraine just keeps getting knocked down and keeps getting back up and keeps fighting. It's incredible. I know, obviously David had worked on John Wick before, but now as you have this sense of ownership, which is so exciting to see, and like you creating the projects, right, and championing the projects that you want to make, that you want to star in. Do you have that sense of like, you look at other movies that are happening in the space, or creators who are working out there, and you're like, I want to do that, I can do that, I want to pursue that? You feel like you are able, or do you have, I guess I'm curious, is that even kind of how you approach looking at which projects to take next?
Very much so, yeah. And I feel really lucky that there are other women doing this at the same time. People who I consider friends, people like Patty Jenkins, who, she's really kind of raised that bar as to what, that type of movie looks like and feels like. I'm constantly inspired by what other women are doing out there. And I'm also inspired by how we're all backing each other up, how we so want each other to succeed for the sake of everybody. We realize if you're in this position where you get to have the opportunity, there's a responsibility to hand that baton over, to open the door, to keep it open, that it's not just about you. And in that sense, it's been really amazing to kind of see, listen, it's still disproportionate to, our male counterparts out there. We have to kind of keep putting the pressure on our industry to change that. But I'm constantly inspired. I have 2 young girls. I want my 2 young girls to grow up and not even think that this is weird, or that this is unusual, or that this is strange. I want this to be normalized.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I love that, like, even since Atomic Blonde, you came out, there's a reveal in The Fate of the Furious. Cypher is the real big bad the whole time. You're a villain in that. And then we get caught up to the Old Guard as well. And watching the Old Guard and seeing that scene where you and Kiki Lane are just duking it out in the airplane that's flying by. And I was just watching it. I was like, gosh, this action is so cool. And it's weird that like I've almost come to expect it now, especially from like the action roles you choose. Or I'm like, yeah, of course Charlize would like be having this incredible long take and putting all this into it. I'm curious, like, what was it about this part in Andy in the comic that really, really spoke to you? And I from reading kind of the production material and seeing interviews behind the scenes, that this, even from everything you did before, required an additional layer of training, because Andy as a character had such a wealth of different fighting style expertise by virtue of being millennia old.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the first thing that kind of grabbed me was just seeing a lot of potential in raising the physical bar, that action bar. I felt like this world really lent itself, these characters, the circumstances, and the set pieces really lent themselves to really challenging action. And I think that was one of the first things that I noticed. But I don't think I would ever want to just make a film based on how great I could create action scenes. There was very much an emotional story here that resonated. even though this is a sci-fi story, that feels incredibly grounded in reality. And I think the struggle with humanity in this is very ever present, even just looking at where we are and we find ourselves today in this kind of social and cultural place that we're in. This story lives and breathes very much in that, which is unusual, I think, sometimes in sci-fi. But I think my taste is just always going to, movies like Prometheus. Like, if there's not an emotional connection that I can kind of like hang my coat on, it's very hard for me to invest. And I think when you find a piece of material that lends itself to both, you realize how special that is. And when I read this graphic novel, I saw great potential for us to celebrate both of those boxes and push the envelope.
Yeah. I had this, when I read the graphic novel for the first time, I was just so impressed by kind of the scope and humanity of these characters. And it's so interesting how you guys imbued that and brought that to life, on Netflix and in the show. I'm curious, like, how have some of your experiences almost layered on each other, fed into each other? Because I hear you talk about going from Mad Max to Atomic Blonde, and I can imagine like the skill set from going from Atomic Blonde to The Old Guard is the same. Like, what do you bring with you, and what are you looking to challenge yourself with in these roles?
I think you touched upon it earlier. There's a difference in style of fighting. So that's always nice, right? So you're hitting the gym and realizing you're going to learn some new skills. There was a sense of fighting in most of the movies that I've done, even though there's a skill level and there's a style of fighting, I still played women where, they were allowed to get scrappy, and so when you can get scrappy, you can hide a lot of things. In this case, I couldn't, because this character is so skilled, and the wealth of information just in martial arts is thousands and thousands of years old. Anybody who knows anything about martial arts knows that the discipline that goes behind, learning any kind of martial arts is so gnarly. I have read books of martial artists who, give everything up and go live in a hut in Thailand for 40 years. And that's to learn one style of fighting. So we knew that was definitely an obstacle. The narrative of trying to get that story across had to be very specific. We had 4 months, and we had to really hone in on the things that I could really excel at. And so those first couple of weeks when you walk into the gym, you're really trying to assess. You're trying to see what you can excel in, what you shouldn't even be wasting any time on. And that's when you have a good team. And Danny Hernandez, our fight coordinator on this, was really, really good at watching me and realizing that we never wanted to force a circle into a square. We had what we had, and we had to figure out what could shine out of that. And so a lot of it was, for me, focusing, for me in the beginning, I think when I started my action career, it was just so important to sell the authenticity of like, yes, I can fight, and I can take this guy down, and I can survive this. Like, there was such a level of like wanting to prove that to audiences who for years said like, no, a woman could never fight a guy that size. In this case, it wasn't so much like, yeah, I can take the guy down. It was like, I can take the guy down with real technique. And so that I never had to work on before.
I wanted to end kind of with a forward-looking question. I read this quote from your partner at your production company, Denver and Delilah, AJ Dix, who told the New York Times that, quote, to their mind, nothing scares you. And I'm curious for you, at this point, do you feel that? Do you feel that that's true? Do you feel like there are things that you look at and you're like, nah, that's too intimidating or too much? Or does that just kind of drive you to rise to the challenge on what that thing would be?
I think that the essence that I put forth, that there might be no fear, is completely motivated by fear. I think I just cover it up, but the truth of it is that everything actually scares me. I don't know really how to create not from a place of fear. Not that I'm saying that you can't. I just have never. I don't know if I ever could. I think the idea of going into a project and not being scared would actually freak me out. It would feel really wrong. I think that my creativity really thrives around my fear. I think I'm just very good at covering it up. And I think there's a part of how I was raised that made, not that it necessarily is the right thing, but I was raised very much in the sense of like, you know, you get up, you do it, and you don't really like wallow in anything. You don't really show any of that stuff, but it doesn't mean that I don't feel it. I feel it on an everyday, every second basis. But I think it is the thing that makes me not stop. And it's the thing that keeps me up every night when we're shooting a film. I play the movie over and over and over and over and over in my head because I realize that you have 30, 60, 100 days to shoot it. And then after that, that's it. Like it's in the can. And if you don't have it, you don't have it. And so I think I have an obsessive nature, but I definitely, it's very sweet that AJ says that about me, and he knows me really well. I think I set forth that energy, but really, truly, it is fully fed by panic.
Listen, if you continue delivering the finished products that we get from panic and fear, I think we're all just lucky to have you there, putting that energy into these projects and continuing to raise the caliber of what action and so many of the other genres you work in as well can be. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to talk today. It's just been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for taking the time to want to talk about these things. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
It's important. It's important that we talk about it and we reflect on how far we've come, and hopefully inspire more people to keep wanting to push the bar as we go forward. So Charlize,
exactly.
The Old Guard is of course on Netflix right now. People can check that out. But thank you so much for taking the time, and I look forward to the next chat with you.
Thank you so much.